Good evening and welcome to this subcommittee meeting of the Finance Subcommittee. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chairperson Netta,
Present.
Mr. Dakota,
Here.
Mr. Lay, two present, one absent.
We're meeting tonight to start looking ahead. We've spent a lot of time looking in the present, trying to balance this year's budget. But we have to now start looking ahead toward next year's budget. And a lot has been made by some people already based on the preliminary number that the governor has suggested that the school department is getting this excessively large amount of additional money in Chapter 70. The facts are, when you take a look at what our upcoming expenses are, we may be facing, I believe we may be facing a situation similar to last year where we may have to be looking at more cuts. The number right now is a preliminary number. The House of Representatives have not made their budget presentation yet, and then the State Senate has not made theirs. So we have a little ways to go, but it is time to start looking and planning. And with that, I would like to turn this over to the Deputy Superintendent or the Superintendent, either one who would like to begin. What I'd like to know is, first of all, based on the early numbers that we have, what is going to be Lowell's requirement for net school spending, what the outlook is for Chapter 70, and what the city's total contribution will have to be.
As you mentioned, we are currently working on two budgets. We have to monitor the current budget every day because, as I keep saying, it's only balanced to have a starting point, but we are in a very risky situation. Every day we figure out if one account is not sufficiently funded to cover something, we have to cancel a purchase order and find another way to pay it. But as you mentioned, we have started the budget process for next year to get an idea of whether we're looking at adds or reductions. The initial Chapter 70 numbers made all of us feel as though, whoa, we might be okay because we were getting $7.6 million more in Chapter 70 funding and an additional 2.2 of required city funding. That brings it up $9 million. And if you get that additional revenue, your net school spending also goes up, which means we have to increase spending on the schools, whether it's on the city side or the school side, by $9 million. So assuming we get that whole if the city agrees that the $9 million comes to us, with the preliminary budget figures, when I went through the entire budget and made estimates like on health insurance, things like that, and did a preliminary update to the salaries, we are looking at a $3 million deficit if we get the $9 million. So if you'd like, I want to tell you what I'm doing to make sure that we don't mistakenly think we have more or less than we really do. We don't want to make any mistakes. So everything that we've learned this year with the current budget, I'm trying to find a solution for the next budget so that we don't face those issues.
Before we go down that road, let's just look at some preliminary. According right now, what is the estimated increase in salary and step increases for our budget for next year?
For teachers alone, because I have not finished all of the other step increases for the other unions, for teachers alone, it's over $5 million.
Healthcare cost, I have heard and assume are going up. Have we received any indication of how much that increase will be?
Yes, the city CFO said to expect about 3.3 or 3.5.
Which will add how much approximately?
Over $1 million.
And then transportation, I believe this in the contract it goes up this year and, also, doesn't it?
I thought it was consistent, but one of them does increase this year. So, but we're not even increasing that line item by potential increases to the students. We're hoping that we've grown as much as we can for right now. We haven't done a projection yet. We're hoping that the MIT study will help us offset that somewhat.
So, I mean, just right now, between just the teachers and the health insurance, we're at a $6 million increase right now. So, and that's like you said, before you do the rest of the unions and we get that transportation number fixed. Are there any other costs that we know of that are going to be rising this year?
It was in my packet, let's see. No, they're all just going up by their typical inflationary costs, but, and like I said, this $3 million does not include when we have to add fifth graders or when we have to change programs. This is just the current staffing model with their step increases and their, the raise, the annual raise.
Okay, so you wanted to start something and I interrupted you, so I'm going to let you go on.
No, that's okay. So I wanted to let you know that every line item in the budget, because it's at $180 million, I mean, we have different funding sources, so it looks like it's 170, but I know that there are different funding sources. When it all comes together, it's an extremely large budget, so there's so many moving parts. So in order to keep the reconciliations and not have anything fall through the cracks, I'm trying to put controls in place. So we've met with each principal over the last week and a half, and we created, instead of just a roster, we've taken the roster and I've done a position control chart for elementary and for middle, and that's your attachment 1 and 2. And what this has done is each school, because no one's ideally funded, each school thinks they might have it very difficult. They might know they're short-staffed, but unfortunately, they may have far more than the school that has even greater need. The way I can explain that is if one school has a high ELL population, as those students move on to the middle school or the high school, we may not necessarily cut that ELL teacher from that school because no one may have done that study. Whereas another school who has an influx of ELL students may not have the luxury of getting an additional teacher due to budget constraints. So how do you tell one school that we need to cut without having a way of defending it? So the position control that I've developed for the elementary and the middle was based upon meeting with the principals, and the assistant superintendent of curriculum helped me learn what you get for each program. For instance, a CSA teacher, a classroom for CSA requires 3 CSA paras. So I made it where it's a systematic way that everyone can look at a uniform staffing model. If you have a 4-strand elementary school, you can expect 4 classroom teachers at each level. You can expect 1 special ed teacher per grade level. And then anytime you deviate from that, we should be able to look at the enrollment for special ed or ELL and justify that deviation. And this will allow us to make the difficult decisions equitably and reassign teachers based upon where the greatest needs are. So that's the first thing that we did, roster confirmation and finding out what the needs are, developing this position control for each of the schools, and that solves the problem of equity and understanding the models. The next one, which is attachment 3, is a school site budget that existed years ago with the school department, and that will pull in all your staff rosters and staff salaries into this site budget. So each school will have an actual site budget that will show the FTEs by position and the cost, and then that site budget ties into your overall. So with the current budget, we may have 40 social workers listed, but the funding only showed 32 teachers. This will avoid that. By having the roster, the position control, and the school site budget feed into an overall budget, I can take that same staffing models and give you your 30 art teachers, 30 music teachers, but then they also tie into your overall teachers. So I just wanted to share those, the progress we've made with that. Staffing is our biggest cost factor, so having a real good control on this is very important. Any questions on that so far on the position control on the staff side? No?
Mr. Dakota?
Thank you. So I think I understand what you were just talking about, and have there been discussions with the union in terms of, like, if we had, am I getting this correct? If you're, say, you're school A, and you had this kind of staff requirement this particular school year, then the following year, those needs are not the same, but school B does have a necessity, you could move that person over to this other building, is that what that meant?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. And so, but I'm sure the union was checked with that, and we're good with that?
Well, we haven't made any decisions yet because we're still just we're just costing out the current model, but we know that there are a lot of moving parts with changes.
So any of the changes that we anticipate, we've already had conversations with the union on. The school committee will be brought abreast of some of those recommendations. I can give a little overview at the next tonight's meeting, but at the next meeting, you'll have a full report on that. So anything further, we've also alerted the union that there could be potential cuts that could be made, and anything further will be in conversation with them. We meet with them regularly and have frequent conversations.
Thank you.
Mr. Dakota just mentioned, the movement of teachers. One of the things that was voted last year was a pilot program where we took fifth graders out of the Sullivan and put them at the Riley and Moody. A couple of us have been contacted by parents who have heard, or city councilors who have heard of changes. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? Because as I mentioned to you when I saw you at the Knowledge Bowl last night, I had to say I'd get back to them on that.
So I wanted to be sure that all of the pieces of the puzzle were going to fit and it was going to work before bringing things forward. And I wanted to make sure all of the people who needed to be informed were informed. So to date, we have not. I am meeting with the teachers tomorrow afternoon at the Sullivan School, any teachers from any of those schools, and then on April 2nd, I'm meeting with the parents, any parents from any of those schools that would like to participate. So the recommendation is to, although we all really value the K-5 model, we cannot sustain it with the current situation that we have. There are a number of inequities in it, such as if we were able to move everyone to a K-5 this year, it would be wonderful. But we really spent some time looking at this scenario, next scenario. Some people at the table had big headaches after those meetings. But we did, in all sincerity, really, because it impacts children and it impacts our staff and our families, we really wanted to take a good, hard look at this. We also have a school, the Sullivan, that had 6 open classrooms when we have some of our schools that are bursting at the seams. And one of those schools that was impacted adversely by this transition was the Butler, because unfortunately, there wasn't a plan for the Lincoln School students' 4th grade. So many of them would have normally gone to the Sullivan and didn't have a place. So what we need to do is create the balance back. And also the additional piece is that we have some of our 5th grade children who are in those programs don't have the same allied arts, the same time as all of our other 5th grade students do, and also access to after school and activities, intramurals. So at this time, it's going to be, you'll get the full report on April 3rd, but I want to make sure that all of the constituents had a chance to ask questions and have a conversation.
Did some type of notice go out? Because I'm hearing that what got people, I guess, concerned was a notice went out, and I don't know if the notice is vague or what, but the parents are wondering where exactly their students are going and how is that going to be determined?
Yeah, so I believe that one of the principals sent a message out to their families about a meeting. So that's probably how some of this began.
Your next attachment 4 is the Chapter 70 preliminary summary, which does show what we were just discussing about the 7.6 million in additional Chapter 70 and the 2.2 increase to the required contribution from the city. As we explained with that, it looks like even if we get the entire $9 million, it's pretty much gone. And you mentioned the salaries. We talked about health insurance, talked about those type of things, but we also lost all of the offsets. So we're not able to use the offsets that were not allowed, but the budget was built on that, so we no longer have that. So I can do a summary when we're finished with the budget, showing you exactly where the money went. But I wanted to let you know, like I was explaining about the teachers, if you look at the following attachments, attachment 6, 6A, 6B, and 6C, what I did is I took our current teacher model, all of our teachers, and I went through and figured out where they stand on what step they're on, what degree level they're on. And once I master this and watch this every year, then I'll start to see the trends of how many early, like bachelor's, first-year teachers we have, and then I would be able to estimate how much we really need and how much we're expecting to go away with retirements, for instance. And then I did some charts to show you that breakdown. 6C, attachment 6C, actually will show a first-year bachelor's. We have 25 teachers that are first-year bachelor's. Because of our mid-year increases, budgeting is extremely complicated because we don't have a grid that shows this is the cost for a first-year bachelor's. This is the cost for this fifth-year master's teacher. So I built this grid with your first day, your midpoint, and your overall cost. And then I would take the 25 teachers in that classification and find out the cost for that category. Underneath each of these grids, you'll see 2,494. That's showing you just the cost of the step increase before the raise was applied. It's very complicated because each of these teachers are moving to another grid. They get the step increase, which is approximately 2,500 from first year to step 1. They get that step increase, plus they move to another grid. So that's what 6C will show you. You start to learn, just based upon this type of grid, you'll start to see that each step increase is going to cost us $2,500, $3,000. Attachment 60 is a work in progress, and it's also with teachers because that's about $85 million. That's our biggest cost factor, and it's a work in progress. It's not finished, but I wanted you to see the complicating the complications because of the split level increases. The first several steps, you can see 25 teachers in your first year move to step 1. But when you go down to step 7 and on, we have someone sit on step 7 for 5 years. So there are different teachers at different first year, second year, third year. So we had to go manually through the 144 teachers or the 205 teachers that were on step 8. I had to go through and figure out how many of them are due to move up. So even though this is not complete, I just wanted to show you how difficult the budgeting process is to get it accurate. I then put in the updated foundation budget because, as you know, there's a problem with the foundation formula, and we're going to have a forum ourselves on April 22nd with Brockton. And to explain that, this foundation budget would be a perfect example. That's attachment 7. This foundation budget shows you how the Department of Ed builds our foundation budget. It takes our enrollment in each type of program, and it will state the number of students in that area, and then it gives us an amount that they expect to fund us for that. So for instance, our foundation formula says that we should have approximately 840 teachers when we have 740 teachers. And then that means we have bigger class sizes. But if you look on the opposite end, I'll take special ed paras. The funding formula says that we should have 45 special ed paras because they're taking the number of students and they do a ratio. You should have 12 kids per teacher, let's say. But what they don't take into account is that most of our special ed students have a one-to-one para. They don't give us additional funding for that. So these are the type of complications we face. And this causes a problem because what happens is we get this net school spending, they develop your foundation budget, they figure out what they think the city should be able to afford based upon their ability to pay, which is wealth and income. Then they determine your Chapter 70 based on that. If they give us one number, but our cost is higher, the number of teachers is increasing, even though our student population may decrease, everyone looks at us and thinks, well, we're rich, or that we have too many staff members, not understanding we're mandated to do this. If we're mandated to take on a one-to-one para for a student with a certain need, or if we're mandated to have 3 CSA paras for every CSA teacher, if we're facing these issues, we face these mandates, but we're not getting sufficient reimbursement for it, then we have to cut in other areas. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place. So this forum we're going to have on April 22nd, Brockton is going to come, and they'll help us with the presentation. We'll have a panel, and we'll invite other communities that are facing the same issues, and their numbers will be plugged into the template, and, we'll all be part of this lawsuit that's going to address this.
Now, several years ago, when Bernie Lynch was here, they ran a forum out in Tingsboro, I believe it was, where somebody from DESE came and did a presentation to try to explain the formula. It is I sat through that and met with the gentleman afterwards. It is a very complicated formula. The other thing about this formula, it is based on the number of students you have as of October 1st. Mm-hmm. So if we get an influx of students during the year, as we have in the past because of the earthquakes in Puerto Rico or other natural disasters, those students do not get counted into our foundation budget. Mm-hmm. if it happens after October 1st. Mm-hmm. The other part of this formula, as you mentioned, is that the state provides you a certain amount of money in Chapter 70. It is my understanding that Chapter 70 is strictly for educational purposes, and the school department gets whatever the state says is that Chapter 70 requirement. Mm-hmm. However, a part of that is the local mandated contribution. So, for instance, Lowell, I believe, is required this year to contribute about $44 million. Is that correct?
49 million.
That'll be for the year 20.
Oh, yes, and 47
million this year. Mm-hmm. Okay. Of that 47 million, I believe we received 15 million this year in cash as a cash contribution from the city at the beginning of the budget season. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Yes.
So out of a 47 million, we received 15. Mm-hmm. The rest of that then has to be made up by the city for them to meet their net school spending requirements.
Yes.
The way that is done is, to let the people know, the way that is done is through what they call this maintenance of effort. And what happens is that just like in the food service where we can charge some money to indirect cost, the city gets to charge for what they consider direct cost for a number of programs, including the auditor, the treasurer, the MIS department, trash pickup, the SRO, the school resource officers, snow and ice, for only, it is supposed to be for only the parking lots and the driveways. It is not supposed to be the streets. because the city is required to do the streets anyway. So all of this gets charged. Now, when I say that gets charged, I want people to understand. The city of Lowell passes a budget for, let's use the treasurer's office as an example. Whatever that total budget is, they give us a number. So in 2018, they said that out of whatever $1.8 million, let's say, was the budget for the treasurer's office, they charged the school department approximately 44%, or $355,000 toward the maintenance of effort. And that goes for all the administrative departments, the treasurer, the auditor, MIS, and purchasing were each charged 44%. This year, the largest increase that we saw in not this year, I shouldn't say that, 2018, the past school year. Our charges for police, school resource officers, went from $519,083 in the 16-17 year to $1,072,058 in fiscal 18. That almost doubled. Now, I don't believe we added school resource officers. I did see a printout where we were charged for crossing guards. We were charged for the traffic supervisor, who's the head of the crossing guards. We were charged for the people in the painting shop of the police department who are assigned to paint the crosswalks and the fire lanes at the schools. That is not, and I have a copy of our memorandum of understanding that was originally signed, I believe it goes back to 2002, and it specifically says crossing guards are not to be counted. And even the report that goes to the state says these are charges that have to be approved by the school committee. To my knowledge, we were never informed of such a radical increase. And I know we need to be working collaboratively with the city, but I get very annoyed when I hear certain counselors trying to paint the school department as this wild spending, costing the city a ton of money. If you look at the city's budget, the amount of tax dollars that come to the school in a direct contribution was $15 million through property taxes, meal taxes, whatever it was. If you look at the police department, it is $25 million. If you look at the fire department, I believe it's $18 million, and DPW was like $11 million. So these maintenance of effort charges, as I pointed out the other day, and you point out in this packet, which is available online, in fiscal year 15, the city charged us $22,444,000. By fiscal year 17, that had grown to $23 million, and by fiscal year 18, which was the last year, it had gone up to $25,819,000. This year, I believe we're looking at pretty close to a $27 million number if they're going to meet their net school spending, and I don't know how they're going to justify that. And so, before counselors start whacking the school department, I think it's time that they look in their own backyard and look at what these charges that we're getting for maintenance of effort. There were motions before I even joined the school committee to look and to revise the maintenance of effort agreement, and nothing had been done. You and I and Mr. Hall have met recently. We met with the superintendent. We're trying to get a meeting with the manager's office again to look at it. One of the things that I never understood, and I still don't, how the school department or any department is expected to set a budget when they don't know what they're being charged. So we know what our salaries are. We know what our insurance costs are. We know roughly, what a lot of our expenses are, except we don't find out what the maintenance of effort is until after. Sometimes not until September or October, once the city submits. So one of the things in the proposal that we're looking at is to try to set the number beforehand so that everybody knows. And I'm not sure how the city's going to respond to that, but I don't know how anyone can plan a budget when they don't know what they're being charged. And I know the city's going to fall back on, well, we don't know what we're being charged for maintenance for the schools. But if you look historically, we have historic numbers from 2011 all the way through 2018. We know what we've been charged for building maintenance, and it's always been somewhere under or right around $500,000. In 2018, it was $514,000. In 2017, it was $529,000, and it dropped lower as the years backed up. So I don't buy that argument. I think we can build in some safeguards for them. I know snow and ice is a variable, but again, we can build in some safeguards for them. So I know when you ask the city to increase, I mean, they're looking at having to find $2 million in a cash contribution that we want to see because that's what their increase is. I'm afraid that based on history that we've seen, we're not going to see that. We're going to see it rolled into this maintenance of effort. And I wish that the parents and the support staff and the groups like, the Lowell Alliance and some others, and I know the foundation budget and going down to the State House and trying to get those things are great. But why don't you start here in the city and help us with the city council? Start lobbying the city council. When you look at the fact that there's $40 million being charged that the city is supposed to be paying, and they're only giving us $15 million, and out of that, we also have to fund transportation, which is not, again, it's supposed to be a city cost. But they've always had, because that's the way we've always done it, is the answer that we get. So when you take away the cost of transportation, now you're looking at $6 million for the operation of the school budget, roughly. That's not a whole lot of tax dollars being spent. We get our money from the state. Chapter 70 is what funds our schools. And we need the city to increase their funding, and we need to work collaboratively. We need to have counselors stop finger pointing. We need to work together to do this. And that's my little rant for tonight. Madam Superintendent.
I just wanted to let you know that as recently as yesterday, I communicated with the city manager, and they have the draft proposal in hand, and they're reviewing it. And then they'll be in touch as far as a time to meet.
Have you been given any indication yet? I know it used to be with Bernie Lynch and Kevin Murphy that sometime around the beginning of February, you would receive a letter from the manager giving you an approximate what the budget would look like. Have we received that yet?
I just met, we had the City Finance Committee meeting today it was from 3 to 4:30, and at that time, the city CFO told me that we should expect that in the next couple of weeks, so it's a bit late this year. But I wanted to also let you know that what you're saying is absolutely true. We have to spend more to get more. If we don't meet these minimum requirements by the government, again, for the public to know and for everyone to know, we're not the ones setting this. The government decides, the state decides how much we need to spend per student based on their character, the criteria that they set. When they come up with this number, if we do not spend it, we lose money. If you go below net school spending, the Chapter 70 will eventually be reduced. So it's almost it's forcing districts to work and, to fund their schools, or we lose the aid that they offer. So we have to spend more to get more. And I wanted to also back up what you said about we are not overspending. As we said, we actually don't have enough teachers based upon the formula. We're forced into spending more in areas that are mandated by the government, but yet we don't have the funding. For instance, I heard that people thought there was some kind of form that said we had a $10 million increase to teachers. So I researched that. If your contract ended in the year 13-14, in 14-15, and 15-16, you spent almost 2 years negotiating the next contract. It was settled in March of 2016. In June of 2016, you did 2 years of retro. So it wasn't a $10 million increase to our staff in 1 year. Numbers, if you're presenting to the your stockholders, you want to look like you're rich and you get higher ratings. If you're presenting to the IRS, you want to lower that, right? So the $10 million makes us look like we got a substantial increase, but that was really a 2-year retroactive payment. So and like I explained earlier, we got 0% in 16-17, so when you take that 3, 3, and 3 that people are referring to, if you spread that over the 5 years, it's really only a 2% increase that our teachers received. Most people get a 2% increase per year because they have to keep up. Otherwise, we're going to lose all of our teachers.
Thank you, because you keep hearing about that 3-year contract. That 4th year, which was the first year, which was 0, never gets mentioned.
Right.
And, the city is at this point right now settling their own contracts at 2, 2, and 2. So, I mean, I wasn't part of that original contract negotiations, but when you look at it at the whole, it was a 4-year contract with the first year being 0. So like 2.25%.
Right.
Not that outrageous from what the city itself is doing. Mr. Dakota.
Just to follow up what Assistant Superintendent of Finance said about staffing and so forth, I like to use this analogy with people in terms of how short-staffed we are, and that's all around central and in the classroom, that we are way beyond the bare bones. In fact, I tell people there are bones missing. That's the reality that we're facing every day. So I think to go along with what you had said about we're not just going willy-nilly and spending like crazy people. We're trying to make sure that our kids are getting the best education with a very outdated formula from our Chapter 70 and what the city is giving us. So I agree. I think we're going in the right direction at this point, but thank you.
I think that's why the position control is going to be very helpful if it's included as part of the budget, because it will show one CSA classroom requires the 3 CSA paras. So when people are reading it and they see that our numbers are growing, it's not that we have all these extra people. They're actually mandated to have 3 in that one classroom. So I think the position control is going to be very helpful for the public to understand where our additional staff are going.
Mr. Hoey.
Thank you. We just got this packet 35 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago, and I want to thank you, Ms. Turner, but there's one paragraph that I think sums it all up. It's on the 3rd page, about 3/4 of the way down. It says, and you wrote this packet, correct? Okay, so I'm going to quote you on this. It says, "All in all, we must comply with the state mandates, but don't get reimbursed accordingly. The school departments face the dilemma of following rules without the funding to support it while battling the public image of having too much when we really don't have enough." I think that really sums it up well, and I'd like to thank you for this. It helps. And I knew we were understaffed. It's very simple after you tour the schools and see how hard they're working. So, again, thank you for this.
Ms. Doherty?
Thank you. I'd like to make a comment about the understaffing piece, and then specifically as you're planning the budget, I just had a suggestion. I have something to think about. So in terms of the we just got that report on the number of English language learner students that we have across the district, and I'm going to use round numbers. I think we have like 4,000 students. My understanding is we are not in compliance with state requirements in terms of the ratio of teachers to students. And I know it's not just a simple, you're an English language learner. It really depends on your English proficiency, what kind of supports you need. So recognizing that we are consistently out of compliance with this requirement, that's an area we need to focus on. We need to have, the number of ESL teachers that we need, because that obviously impacts how well a student can learn, how they do on the tests, their success after graduation, everything. It's a whole snowball effect, which is a perfect segue to my point about the budget. So on page 1, and like Mr. Hoey, I just got a glance at this. I know there's going to be a lot more questions and thoughts as we get to delve more into it. But when we're looking at how what you're calling the position control and how you're looking at the staffing. Now, I remember the days when our first grade teachers had full-time paras, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're looking at, we're trying to give the paras to the preschool and the little ones, but once you get beyond kindergarten, you're sharing floating paras for each grade level. So think about that. If it's a 4-strand school, you have fourth grade classrooms that are sharing one para. Mm-hmm. So what do they get? Like an hour and a half in each room? And if there's somebody out, or if they have a special ed meeting or professional development, any reason that the teacher can't be in the classroom, that para is going to be devoted there, especially when we're looking at keeping our substitute teaching costs down, which I know is another control factor. So, we all recognize that there's been a lot of studies and data that shows if you can get kids up to proficiency by 3rd grade, like 3rd grade seems to be the magical year. After that, catch-up gets harder and harder. And I would say our costs increase in trying to get the catch-up. So what I'm thinking, and I'm just throwing this out there, I know, you guys are like in the weeds of doing it right now, but when we look at the staffing models for our elementary schools, and especially if you have the K-8 schools, that if we try to load up the paras in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade more, And I know that, and I know there's going to be other challenges with that we, until we have an alternative program for our troubled 5th and 6th graders, that's a huge amount of pressure on our schools. I recognize that as well. They may not be big in number, but if you have children with real emotional, social behavior problems, they can disrupt not only their own class, they can disrupt a whole school. You'll have a school that has to go into soft lockdown because a child is having emotional and mental concerns, that are just out of control or whatever. I don't know even the correct words to use. So I realize there's some pushback on that, but I really want to think strategically where we are so limited in our staffing about how to provide the supports to those crucial those first years so that we can get more of our kids reading at grade level by grade 3. When the research shows you get the biggest bang for your buck there. So, I see Ms. Desmond is nodding. You agree that there's some validity in trying to look at that. I realize it's not a panacea, but but that's just something I want to throw out there. And it was here, so thank you.
So the position control, luckily, what we did when we had the meetings with the principals is we had assistant superintendent of curriculum there, and we also had the director of special ed there. Now we have the experts that understand what the class models are. When we were talking about how each of the staffing models, we can see where where the requirements are. But one thing that the assistant superintendent of curriculum shared with me is the ELL enrollment. And as you mentioned, those that were scoring under a certain level that require more assistance. So when we're building these position control sheets, we're going to put the overall enrollment, special ed enrollment, and ELL enrollment. Because there are some schools that they may say, well, I have 100 special ed students out of 400, and they think that's horrifying. and it may be, but there are other schools that might have 200 special ed students with the same, of 400. So when you see it all together, you start to see that we're actually needing to shift some of the ELL teachers. We wish we could have an ideal staffing model for everyone. We wish we could overstuff each of the schools, but unfortunately, we can't. So we have to move the teachers where the high enrollment, the high ELL and high special needs students are. So that's why this model will help us see that visually instead of just the numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to add also that, we do need para, just like Ms. Doherty just said, and also we should not forget about the parent liaisons. Those guys help a lot to have direct contact with the families and the students. So I just want to throw that out that we shouldn't overlook the parent liaisons also. Thank you.
We have contractually obligated deadlines to inform all of our staff of potential layoffs, correct?
Yes.
And we're going to, unfortunately, meet all of those deadlines just as a precaution at this point.
We've already sent out the initial, and then, so all of the unions are aware.
Anything else? Is there anything, Madam Superintendent or the Assistant Superintendent, that, or either assistants that are here, Ms. Desmond, anything that you'd like to add or express concern with, or anything that you've even looked at as a possibility of elimination of programs, or have we even reached that point yet?
I'm so glad we instituted the emergency snow bag or whatever that we.
Was it bag?
Yeah.
We haven't had,
We haven't had to use it, which is a good thing, but, it's better to have it ready, not use it. Right.
that's right, it's only March.
So we haven't gotten to that point yet. So the plan is for one more week of work on all of the pieces, because we still have district coordinators who have departments that need to be met with, and all of their numbers and data needs to be reviewed. So once we do that, then we're going to look at the whole picture and keep our fingers crossed, but really, we really need to look. And I would not like to, presume that programs are going to be cut or anything. We really need to look at it carefully. And I think what Ms. Turner explained about really looking at the staffing, taking a really good look. And it's not that we have excess, but we might have a para who remained in the building after the child moved on. And those are some of the things that we started to work on this year when we knew we had to make some shifts, but those are the things that we feel like will impact the budget and help us to, try to stabilize things.
Ms. Doherty?
Just in response, I want to, kind of just for clarification, it seems to me with this really drilling down to each school and their student population and their needs, we should also then achieve better equity. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely.
So instead of saying that, you have 500 students, so this is how much money you get, we're really looking at the needs of those students. Are they special ed students? Are they English language learners? And to have the proper staffing ratios to meet that. So, so that is correct? Mm-hmm. Excellent. I totally support that move.
Yes. That's exactly what this model was trying to do. If I have a broken leg, it may hurt, but someone else might have 2 broken legs, right? So this model, if you tell one principal that you have too many teachers, they could defend that and say, no, I don't. But when you compare it to the other school that has double the population, that's why this model is going to help us with the principals and with the parents and with the public and the city administration. I also wanted to point out that the budget, the amount that I stated, does include estimated increases. I did include estimated increases to the health insurance. I did do a 5% increase to the current out-of-district tuition. I did add back some of the shortages, the cuts that we had to the tutor accounts and things like that. So it may not be that much. It's just that those are the estimates we threw in to hold, as a placeholder.
Well, I know this is only the beginning. I know we have much work ahead of us. We appreciate the work that you all have done, that your team is doing. I think Jackie's point of, the equity is something that I know that this committee and past committees have really, strived to try to achieve. And I applaud all of you for your efforts to try to do that. Just keep the lines of communication. I think you're both doing an admirable job working as collaboratively as you can with the city. That sometimes I know can't be easy because Ms. Doherty and I and Mr. Hoey and and others sometimes get our Irish up when we feel that things aren't being portrayed as they should be. But we need to keep that collaboration working, and if we can just get the city to keep doing the same, we all have to move forward. We have a huge high school project that we're asking all of the city to help us finance. We don't want to get into a fight over, when you're looking at $130 million, fighting over 5 or 10 seems kind of, but to us, that's a huge amount of money. And that's a lot of services for our students. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're pushing so hard on this, from that point. So I thank you for all this information. I thank you for all your hard work. I need a motion to adjourn by Mr. Dakota, seconded by Mr. Lay. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bravo, Mr. Hoey. That was really a quick catch.
See, did I write on mine?
I didn't write on mine.
You didn't? Okay.
Would you be willing to part with it?
I already. There you go.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, when you were talking about that program, so thinking about the Sullivan and then two elementary schools, was that saying ending the pilot or continuing the pilot? Were you saying one way or the other? All right.
Yeah. So I'll have a formal report on that.
Okay.
And I just want to be fair to all the constituents about it. So the pilot was having the 5th grade stay at 4th grade. So it was K through 5, right.
Okay. Okay. And is that meeting you're going to have parents at public, or what type of meeting is that?
It's their parent council meeting.
Parent
Yeah.
council. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.